Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults. Elaine and Diane are certified coaches with personal experience raising children with challenges such as ADHD, anxiety, and more, and extensive experience in guiding parents to raise their complex kids with confidence and calm. On the podcast, Elaine and Diane interview experts, bringing you cutting-edge information about your child's challenges, teach you real-life strategies to create lasting change, and demonstrate how coaching can guide you to parent your complex kids, one conversation at a time. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. I am excited today to have the conversation with Dr. Shirag Shemmassian, and I understand I even pronounced your name correctly, which is pretty good for me. And Dr. Shirag Shemmassian is with us. He's a missions consultant, and he works with complex kids who are looking to fulfill their potential in life. I'm going to kind of cut it there and let you tell us a little bit more about what you do. He was a complex kid himself, and now he's serving the community. So welcome, Shirag, and tell us a little bit about what you do with families of complex kids and how you came to be doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Elaine. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. What I do professionally is I help people get into medical school and also top colleges. And I've been doing this for the better part of 2 decades now. And, there are various ways in which we assist families. So everything from, 4-year course planning. So what courses students should take in college, how to make sure that they're taking on an appropriate level of challenge without overburdening themselves. Of course, this becomes especially important when you're working with students with disabilities or learning differences and all these kinds of things. Right. We assist with planning out extracurriculars, how to develop relationships with rec letter writers, standardized test prep, application essay support, interview coaching, the whole 9 yards. And students also come to us for, consultations around, scheduling MCAT test dates if they need, testing accommodations and, consulting about these kinds of things as well. I mean, this was all very personal for me. I grew up in the States as a child of 2 immigrant parents. Mm-hmm. My parents are ethnic Armenians who were born and raised in Lebanon and left during the Civil War over there in the 70s. And so my brother and I grew up in Southern California, and we ended up growing up in a very insular community in the Armenian community, and went to an Armenian school and all this kind of stuff. And, my teachers were largely immigrants themselves, as was my college counselor. And so, we sort of got handed the immigrant menu of, the careers that you could do, doctor, dentist, engineer, that sort of thing. And then when it was time to apply to college, I said, all right, Mom, Dad, you've been pushing this all our lives. How do we do it? They're like, what do you mean? We didn't go to school here. So that was a pleasant surprise. Right. But it was especially made, I think, complicated in my situation because I grew up with Tourette Syndrome. So it's a diagnosis I carry to this day. But around 8 or 9, I started exhibiting a lot of facial and other motor and vocal tics. And mm-hmm. so my community didn't really know how to handle that, not only with stigma, but also lack of experience. And so I had to navigate these kinds of things about how to get into great schools, yes, but also how to pursue accommodations. And through my personal experience, out of necessity, developed an expertise and was helping an increasing number of people over time through word of mouth, and really developed a heart for helping students, achieve their educational and career goals. And, speaking about students with disabilities and guiding through education is a particular passion of mine.
Well, what occurs to me is, you were a 2E kid, as we call them. You were twice exceptional. You were clearly intelligent enough to be, go into Cornell and UCLA or wherever you did your schooling, if I recall. I think that's what it was. And also challenged with a neurological disorder like Tourette's that had to have its complicating factors. And so I guess the question that's coming up for me is, here you are as an adult looking back with hindsight. What do parents of 2E kids in particular need to understand better about their kids? What do they tend to be missing that you wish, you can stand on your bully pulpit? What do you want them to know?
Yeah, it's going to be a little tough lovey. My advice to parents is to not change your expectations for your child. To maintain high expectations for your kids. I know that every child is different. The level of difficulty they're going to experience is different, not only as far as severity goes, but also there's just an incredible range of, difficulties that students can have. But I think that when parents find out that their kids have a learning difference or a neurological disorder and all this kind of stuff, there is a shock, right?
Yeah.
There's a shock. There might be, some lack of acceptance or denial. And then there's sort of the grieving period of like, I thought my kid was going to do X, Y, and Z, and I don't know if I can have the same plans for them and all that kind of stuff. And I think that unfortunately, from my observations and my experiences, expectations tend to get lower, right? They can do this. Go ahead.
So I want to challenge your language just a little bit, because I'm not disagreeing with you. I do think that a lot of times parents feel like they need to lower their expectations. Sure. The language that we often use is shifting expectations.
Okay.
So that it's not about lowering or raising them, but it's about modifying them to meet the kid where they are developmentally, so that you can help them continue to grow appropriately, but you're not holding them to expectations that they may not be ready for if they've got, say, a developmental delay.
Sure.
How does that land for you?
Understood. And this is, I appreciate you jumping in there. And, this is why earlier on I said, I want to preface this by saying there's an incredible range, right? So obviously there's someone who has, intellectual disability or something like that. Obviously you're going to have different approaches and all this kind of stuff. I guess my takeaway point here is that maintain expectations for their child and help them achieve whatever their ceiling is, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure to assist our students with developing, with having the right accommodations and getting the right resources and all this kind of stuff. But I want to push parents to see that their student is capable of so many things. Depending on the condition, they might be just as capable as others and need additional, supports and things like that. And frankly, when I was growing up, so, I would say my community didn't handle this very well, because they're like, that stuff's just like these American issues, they're made up and all this kind of stuff. You're just being lazy on
First world problem.
I heard all sorts of terrible things, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, as I've grown up and looked back, which essentially was your question, I appreciated, probably they did this unknowingly, my community, but they still maintained expectations, right? And it wasn't great that I had to figure out a lot of this stuff on my own. But, making sure that you're pushing, students to achieve at their highest levels and believing in them, because I believe that kids and adults, we sort of play to the level of our expectations. If even as expectations shift, sure, if we believe in them and we communicate belief, I think that, our kids play up to that. And they meet you where you're at too. So exactly. I think it goes both ways.
Well, and what we often talk about is holding a vision, right? If you can, as parents, we have this vision for what we think our kids are going to be. And then we get the kid, and it turns out we then have to kind of modify that vision to who they are, not who we thought they were going to be.
Sure.
But we still want to hold the vision for their capacity, which is what I'm hearing you talking about, to see that what we want for them is to reach their full potential, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a critical thing. And, anyone who has kids, I'm the parent of a 3-year-old son. So there are going to be folks
You're at the beginning of this adventure.
Much more experience in this. But even I've observed, at such a young age, there are so many things that you thought he would be interested in, or, I want to, help my kid, develop this skill, or, train to, and he's just like, I'm not interested in that thing. And so as parents too, we have to observe what they're naturally gravitating towards, and then, helping them figure out how to achieve that and enjoy it and all this kind of stuff. And you're absolutely right about, kids will show us a lot about what they're capable of and what they're interested in. And it's our job to figure out how to promote that, essentially.
Yeah, in our world, we talk a lot about playing to their strengths and then outsourcing the challenges, right?
Amen.
And so in the work that you're doing and the conversations you're having with kids, what have you gleaned from these bright and challenged kids about what may be difficult for them in their thinking, or what they may need from their families?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge that I observe when working with students with disabilities, and mind you, I'm working with, teens and young adults in this space, the number one concern I see, or the number one thing I observe, is issues with self-belief. I think that there are so many students who are exceptionally, bright or motivated or a combination of these things. And because they don't have many examples, people with similar conditions making it at a high level, they're sort of getting, signals from around them. Are you sure you're cut out for this?
Right.
And that
you
kind
sure
of
you
stuff
could do
creeps
that?
in. And it's important, in the same way representation, when we think about, racial and ethnic representation in different fields, we also want, people who have disabilities and that sort of representation in different fields, and for folks to be outspoken about the challenges and the successes, because, there are kids out there who are looking for role models and examples and things like that. And so when I observe students, a big part of my job is to encourage them. And it comes up in all sorts of ways, whether they can handle the academic load, whether, by getting accommodations, are they cheating or getting an unfair advantage? A big question I get all the time is a big question I get all the time is, I have this disability. Should I disclose it on an essay? Is there a stigma? Is it a yes, no question? Should I disclose or not? Or is it a yes, but the question is how? Right. And so there are a lot of nuances here that we talk about with students all the time, but there's always sort of this concern about, am I going to be left out of X, Y, and Z because of my condition? And so I think helping students develop greater self-belief and promoting their successes is a huge part of what we do as mentors.
Well, I think I mentioned this to you before, and those of you who know me, with permission from one of my kids, I've been pretty open about. I have a kid who is in the process of applying to medical school in her mid-20s, and she has learning disabilities, dyslexia, plus ADHD, et cetera, in our world. And that issue of how do I talk about this? There was not a question whether to talk about it in some way, because it was such a defining part of who she is that she would have felt disingenuous not to share it. But how to share it in a way that felt safe was a huge challenge and very unclear, because on the one hand, they're asking questions, whether it's undergraduate or graduate level. The schools are asking questions about how have you been different? How have you handled adversity? They're asking all this stuff because you think they want to know, but then you do get a lot of advice that tells you don't stand out. So how do you respond to that?
So the question you always have to ask yourself is not whether or not you should share it, but what is the point in sharing it? I think students struggle when they don't have clarity about why they are disclosing something. So a lot of people, when you question and interrogate why they're concerned, it's more of a thing where they just want to say, I want to disclose this thing so that the reader knows I had it harder. That's not good enough. Okay. That's not a good enough reason. A good reason is describing how your condition changed your perspective, how it served as a springboard for your eventual successes, right? So for instance, if I talk about my Tourette syndrome, it's always in the context of what it helped me observe in myself and in the communities that I was serving, and the perspectives that it gave me and the extracurricular trajectory that it set me down on, and what I might want to do career-wise. In that way, you communicate it as an asset rather than any sort of liability or weakness or anything like that, right? And so if you position it that way, it's great. But I think, I see too many people who do have, various disabilities, and they almost say I know that they're asking for adversity, but I'm going to give something that's a little bit less adverse because I don't want to, scare them off from admitting someone with a learning difference. And so they're sort of juggling this, how much do you share on a first date kind of thing? Right. And it's exactly. You don't get, you might not have a repeat date. So you have to really put yourself out there, but do it in a way that you're comfortable with, but also has a clear why.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that what's the point of it and how did it serve you? So let's talk about making this real. I would suspect in my audience that there may not be quite as many parents of kids applying to medical school as there are parents of kids going to undergraduate school. Let's talk a little bit about whose agenda is it when you're supporting kids who are trying to go to some of these higher level schools that we're talking about. A lot of kids in our community are barely getting through high school and going to college at a commensurate level. And then we do have high performers in our communities, I call them, these kids who really have the vision, how do you assess when the vision is the child's versus when the pressure is coming from the parent? How do you deal with that disparity?
Yeah. So you get a pretty good sense, in talking to parents and students early on. Now, there are essentially 4 quadrants, right? There are situations where the parents are highly motivated for their kids to go to a top school, and so are the kids. And there's a lot of alignment there. And obviously the issues, if a student is really, really motivated, but the parents like, yeah, sounds good. This is, their dream and I'm pushing, that's also okay. Where we start running into issues is when parents have ultra high expectations, but their students are either not as high achieving as the parents think or hope the kid is,
or want them to be.
Yeah. Or something like that. Or, they're really interested and the student's high achieving, but they're like, whatever, like, I don't need to go to this Ivy League school or whatever the case might be. And that's the issue, I think, that comes up. That's when it's an issue, I should say. And so it's all about, having open conversations with parents and students, especially with parents, about like, what does this mean to you? Because I think that, again, my parents are immigrants and a lot of the students we support are children of immigrants, right? Whether they're from the Middle East or from South Asia or East Asia or, South America or whatever the case might be. And so a lot of these parents are coming, to this country for work, for different opportunities. And what I've observed in my parents and, other parents is essentially if their kid gets into a great school, it sort of stamps that, we made it.
American dream.
We're going to be good. We're on the right track. So I think top colleges mean a lot more than just the quality of education, right? Because people oftentimes go like, why would you pay this much? Why are people going after these schools that have a less than 5% acceptance rate? Isn't the quality of education, just as good as this other school and this honors college? I'm like, sure. But you're assuming that's all it means to families. That's not all it means to family. That's like saying, why would you buy a Louis Vuitton purse? This $50 purse holds the same amount of stuff. It's not about the amount of stuff it holds, right? So there's a prestige, there's a feeling of comfort that as a parent, I did it right. My kid's going to be okay. They're going to be able to quote unquote leave the nest. So it sort of aligns with our hopes for our kids. And so I think that going to great schools is a wonderful blessing. It's a wonderful thing to take advantage of. We live in a country that probably have the best, post-high school education in the world, which is a blessing. Great. But we have to make sure that we understand what our students want. Because again, if the motivation is not there, it doesn't matter who you hire and all this kind of stuff. Your student might not play to your expectation and they might not achieve the results that you want. So getting that sort of like, what does this mean to you? And also, what is your student trying to achieve? If a student's trying to be a social worker or something like that, going to the most prestigious school is going to have less of an impact on whether they are able to get into a master's of social work program. It's different than if they're trying to go into medical school where undergrad prestige is going to matter more. So what's the ultimate goal? What does it mean to you? All of these things matter, right? What social experiences, region, these kinds of things. So getting clear on that usually drives this discussion. Well,
and what strikes me is that what matters is not just the parent's perspective, but the child's or the teens. Like what we talk a lot about this issue of agenda and ownership. And whose agenda is it? And parents will come to us very often with, my kid's so smart, right? But so these are kids who have the potential to be high achieving, but may not be. And the parent sees it, wants to hold the vision, but for a number of reasons, it may not be the kid's path. It may not be what they're interested in. Sometimes they may not want to pursue it because the parent's so attached to it.
Sure.
And so there's a disconnecting the parent's agenda from the kid's agenda here that I think is part of what I'm hearing you speak to.
Absolutely. And that's going to be the biggest thing. I think that's when, students feel like they can't please their parent no matter what they do.
No matter what.
Yeah. Parents are like, well, I'm trying, maybe you can change. And I tell people, when students have a natural motivation, it moves super smoothly. We'll set the agenda. We'll give the right guidance. I tell parents sometimes, where our support stops, I'll call, I'll text, I'll get them back on, on the saddle. Yeah. What I can't do is fly to your house and get them out of bed. Right. In other words, the motivation has to be there. That's a parent job, right? But that's where you also have to understand as a parent, like what are the limits to support, right? At the end of the day, they have to do it.
Right. And that circles back around to ownership and buy-in. And, in our realm, particularly when you have kids with executive function challenges, even if the motivation's there, that may not still be enough if there's not real ownership and processes in place and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how can people find out more about you? How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah, visiting our website is the best way, shemmassianconsulting.com. I know it's a mouthful, and I'm sure
I was going to say it's in the show notes.
Yeah.
So you don't have to try to smell that, but I will tell you there are 2 M's in Shemmassian.
Yeah, 2 M's, 2 S's. And so, there's a contact form in the top right corner. There's a link on our site, and you can get in touch that way. It'll come straight to my inbox, and I would love to assist. But the other thing is, most of the folks who read our resources never get in touch with me in the sense that they consume a lot of the resources online on our blog and on our YouTube channel. So, if you ever have a question about a certain aspect of college admissions, literally type that topic and Shemmassian in Google and it'll come up. So
Awesome.
It'll be a pleasure to support, however. Thank
you. I appreciate that. And so I guess the question I have, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that you want to make sure that they'll take away from today? What I just heard you say is, do your research, get support, get information, ask for help. Anything else?
I think that's an excellent place to leave it as far as, do your homework, not only about school selection and financial aid and which schools serve students with disabilities well and all this kind of stuff, but also, maintain belief in your child and, encourage them in whatever avenues that they're showing a lot of skill and gifts.
Awesome. I can't ask for more than believe in your kid. That's just at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. So, Shirag, thank you. This has been a pleasure. Before we wrap, do you have a favorite quote or motto that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think it's Mark Twain. Don't quote me on that, but it's whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. I love that one.
I do too. I thought it was somebody different, so we're going to have to look that one up, and we'll find it in the show notes, and I'll let you know.
Happy to be wrong. Yeah,
I hear you. Well, again, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. What I love about this conversation is how the opportunity to hold the vision for what our kids are capable of. And in the world of complex kids, it's so easy as parents to default to what's wrong and where the problems are and where the challenges are. And the work that you're doing is really holding this space, as we would say in the coaching world, for these kids to really be the amazing adults they have the capacity to be. So I really honor that work that you're doing. Thank you for being part of our conversation. And to those of you listening, thanks for what you're doing for yourself and your kids. Reminder for what Shirag is saying today: hold the vision, see what's possible, and help them see that for themselves. That's what makes the difference.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.